Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to our Thursday episode of the Niche Cast. We're from the Niche Case, the niche-case.com, where you can explore some Aotearoa sporting topics. Got big yarns on our website at the moment. We got the White Ferns Plateau, the Great White Ferns Plateau of 2023. It's there. You can read about it. And I have updated the Spin Guru information. Because shout out to our Monday, Friday newsletter via Substack, the nichecase.substack.com. Tomorrow in my newsletter, one of the things I will be writing about is how Craig Howard, the Spin Guru, there was a similar yarn about Craig Howard, the Spin Guru, from Cricket Australia a few years prior to the Spin Guru yarn about Craig Howard, the White Ferns Spin Guru coach. So apparently he was working with young Australian spinners and they used the term Spin Guru. I didn't do a deep dive about it, but off the top of my head, I was like, well, Australia hasn't really developed some young spinners of late. Like they did have the that Murphy, maybe Todd Murphy, he did shine in India, but their spinners weren't very effective in India earlier this year in their Test series. I actually think the state of Australian spinners is quite underwhelming. We've talked about Glenn Maxwell in the World Cup and so on and so forth. So now there's kind of two examples of the spin guru, Craig Howard, not quite being a spin guru, because the White Ferns spinners aren't getting any better either. So we've got a deep dive of the White Ferns on our website. Tomorrow I'll be updating the status of the spin guru, Craig Howard and the White Ferns in the email newsletter. Also on our website, we've got the Kiwis preview for their game against Samoa. Both National League debrief, weekly update thingy-majigs are live on our website as well. Got a Kiwi Ferns breakdown as well, going deep into their gritty loss against Australia. And of course, we will touch on this in a jiffy. The Plunket Shield starts tomorrow, and the most exciting thing is Canterbury's seam bowling attack. So you can read about that on the website. You can read a lot of different things on our website. Just hit up the niche-case.com or just search any topic with the Niche Case in Google and something will probably pop up. Like, that's what we do. We cover the major topics from Aotearoa. As I mentioned, we also do our email newsletter. So that comes out every Monday and Friday via Substack, as well as that Spin Guru update. You might get some Plunket Shield notes from me. You might get some miscellaneous Kiwi NRL notes for the representative footy. Nico the Wildcat, any idea what you're going to write for tomorrow's email newsletter?
Well, there'll definitely be Women's National League Team of the Week, number 4. Working through that one at the moment. Got about half of it sorted. I just finished the thing and then I got to go back and figure that out. Got which centre back over which centre back and whatnot. I will have at least a paragraph on Rob Lowe, who might be about to play the last weekend of professional basketballer in his career. We'll see how that goes. I'm sure I can spin that into some wider Kiwis in the NBL kind of chat. And there's normally something Blackcaps stat related during the World Cup. We'll see how that goes as well. I'm bound to have a few ideas that pop up between now and then.
Well, hopefully our Blackcaps chat can spark some ideas in your brain. The Monday and Friday newsletter via Substack is basically the home of the Niche Case. You're getting things written specifically for the Monday and Friday dispatch. You're getting links to all the big deep dives we do for the website. And of course, you're getting all the podcast information as part of that newsletter. And any other links you might need, they're there as well, such as links to our subscriber podcast. We do the subscriber podcast for the generous folk who donate to the Niche Case via Patreon. You can join the Patreon whānau, patreon.com/elnichecase, EL Niche Case, or you can upgrade your Substack newsletter subscription to a paid subscription. And every week we drop an extra podcast just for those generous souls. Big up to everyone supporting the Niche Case and funding the Niche Case. Of course, you don't need to, but it is a lovely gesture and we appreciate it. Yesterday on our subscriber podcast, we did preview some Blackcaps versus Afghanistan cricket. Funnily enough, the Blackcaps won because they're really good at cricket. We also debriefed and reacted to the All Whites losing to Australia. And I'm just curious if were any leftover All Whites thoughts from our kōrero yesterday that you want to just throw out into the atmosphere of Aotearoa.
Yeah, I'm going to write about this after we finish recording this as well. So it's something I have been pondering a little bit, and I think it's easy to look at the result and say like same old always. I think that's the trick that the trap that we don't want to step into. You know, being like, well, they lost 2-0 and 1-0 to Australia last year. They lost 2-0 to Australia this year. It's yet another All Whites game where they just slightly more frail at the back than they should be, and they didn't look like they could score a goal. They didn't often look like they could score a goal, and that's been a recurring theme. And so it feels like it's just like banging your head against the door and same old, same old. I think it is important to draw a distinction between this All Whites team and previous All White cycles teams, though. Like, I think even in ways where they do have a lot of that continuity, and it is this, the same issue that has lingered on for quite a while, particularly the goal scoring thing that we see, not just with the All Whites, the football Ferns don't score enough goals. Wellington Phoenix, both of their teams last year didn't score enough goals. That was their issue. Like, this is just a New Zealand football thing. And it takes more than 6 months to solve that stuff, right? I think the important thing to look at with the All Whites is that 16 players took the field against Australia in that game. 13 of those 16 players have fewer than 20 international caps. Like, this is a team that's almost entirely at the start of their international careers. They're not the guys who have been there trying and failing over and over and over. The guys who are left from teams who have done that in past cycles are the best ones. It's Chris Wood, it's Michael Boxall, it's Bill Tuiloma. They were the three guys above 20 caps who played in that game. That's like, it's the same, but it's not the same, because this is a All Whites team where you can see this isn't their potential, what they did against Australia. That's their starting point, right? And I think that's the reason to avoid stepping into those bear traps, right? This is a team that should get better as they go along. There's like all these guys that have scope to improve. If they're not already at big clubs, they're on the verge of transfers to bigger clubs. That's where they're going to continue to grow and develop and get better. And there were guys who would have helped this team who weren't involved there, and that none of the A-League players were around. Joe Bell wasn't there. Michael Rojas wasn't there. Like, this is an example even further of they were dipping into the depth bag a little bit against Australia. And so if they still did the same thing that the other guys did, well, maybe their depth is decent then all of a sudden in ways that it hasn't been before, because they can afford to still maintain at least a steady thing, if not improving, at least maintain a steady level without a few of their key guys. So I think that stuff is important to keep in context with the All Whites. Is they do have a young team. They are on a journey. They're at the start of that journey, though, and we can't expect them to be ahead of where they are yet.
So you might not be using the word toothless, as I saw on stuff.co.nz.
I saw that as well, and I thought it's a little bit much. Like, it's not that it's wrong; it's just that it's being a bit toothful in your criticism of them.
It's
maybe you don't need to bite so much into that.
It's also coming from the same publication that apparently told us the Blackcaps suck a few weeks ago. So let's take it with a grain of salt.
Hey, they were right about Lockie Ferguson's first 11 status, though. He's brought that back around.
Shout out to him.
Yep.
As you talk through that, I'm like, yes, this is a Kiwi football issue. And that's important to note as far as the goal scoring and creative flair up front goes, because many of the media people and many of the people talking about these teams in isolation are saying the same thing. So maybe, like, yeah, the football Ferns struggled to score goals, but maybe it's not Yika Kumkova's fault, because the All Whites also have the same issue, and the Wellington Phoenix women have the same issue.
And the men. If you take away Oscar Zavada last season, no one could score goals, and Oscar Zavada's not a Kiwi.
So it's Like, yeah, maybe the coaches suck. Maybe there's issues in the team. Maybe they are toothless in attack. But maybe this is just where Kiwi football is at right now, because we're seeing the same thing across multiple different teams and multiple different kind of stages of how where those teams perform. But let's just chill out for a second. We need some mindfulness. What do you got?
Yeah, let me whip this back up because I thought I'd go a little bit more gothic today, and I picked out an Edgar Allan Poe quote, um, which is here somewhere. So this is taken out of one of his stories. I don't know which one. It just says Edgar Allan Poe: The Complete Stories of Poems. So it's one of them. doesn't narrow down the scope at all. But it goes: years of love have been forgot in the hatred of a minute. It's a nice little reminder that no matter whatever that Poe character was going through in that moment, you can undo a lot of good with a few seconds of bad behavior or just unfettered emotion. This is why we try to keep these things in check, right?
Once again, like, you don't know that you're feeling the hatred. You don't know that you're feeling the darkness if you're not aware of it. Because if you've got a lifetime full of love and then you feel the hatred, you feel the darkness within you, but you're aware of it, so you can kind of just, yo, mate, kick back. It's all good. We're alive. We're grateful. We're here on planet Earth. We love each other. We love ourselves. Then you release the hate. And that hate doesn't have any impact on, it doesn't unwind all of the love. But if you let the emotions take over, then that hatred can overrun all of the love, light, and positivity that you have been cooking. The Blackcaps are certainly cooking.
Oh yes,
The Blackcaps are cooking, and they're not just cooking on a like 4-burner stove in a regular old house. They got the gas cooker on the beach. Not even a fire. They've got the gas cooker. They're camping. They're cooking. They got some eggs. They got some bangers. They got everything you need for a beautiful Kiwi morning, which is what we had this morning with another victory over Afghanistan. I do want to highlight first, though, it's a fantastic weekend of International Rugby League. Big Polynesian flavour in the Polynesian capital of the world, Auckland. Kiwis taking on Samoa. Kiwi Ferns taking on Tonga. You got New Zealand A versus Tonga A. So shout out to Scott Edwards, Netherlands captain, born in Tonga. How about that? He is Australian otherwise.
Netherlands cricket.
Netherlands cricket.
Born in Tonga.
Scott
What a
Edwards,
fact.
born in Tonga, raised in Australia. So shout out to him. But the Blackcaps were clinical in their defeat of Afghanistan. For those who didn't watch it too deeply, Will Young, most batters scored some runs. Will Young scored a 50. Tom Latham and Glenn Phillips ground out the middle stages. They both passed 50 as well. Mark Chapman went berserk at the end, which is good for him. 25 runs, not out, a strike rate of over 200. And then the Blackcaps bowlers, Trent Boult, 2 wickets. Santner, 3 wickets. Ferguson, 3 wickets. Henry was very tidy for his 1 wicket. Rachin Ravindra also took a wicket. And Glenn Phillips had a trundle. I did just tweet out some facts and figures about Blackcaps cricket. You would also be interested to note, mate, that they offered 5 wides in this game. Not much else.
But only 5 wides.
And that's
no balls, no buys, no leg buys, no penalty runs.
It's very impressive. So here's just a hard and fast run through of my favorite kind of nuggets. Will Young has 7 scores over 50 in 17 innings this year. He averages 42.8 in ODIs. Tom Latham has 3 scores over 50 in his last 3 innings. He averages 54 in India for ODIs. Mark Chapman has a strike rate of 114.7 in ODIs this year. Matt Henry's almost as good as Trent Boult in ODI bowling. Matt Henry averages 25.6. Trent Boult averages 23.6. Lockie Ferguson has 6 wickets in his last 2 games. This is more than he took in 3 ODI series prior to the World Cup. which I think it was England, Bangladesh, and India. He took 5 wickets, and he played nearly every game of those series. He took 5 wickets across 3 series. Now he's got 6 wickets in 2 games. Mitchell Santner has a wicket in 5 consecutive ODIs. He's got 15 wickets this year, and he is chasing his career best tally of 26 wickets in 2017.
I have another one to add to that as well. I was looking up old mate part-time bowler Rachin Ravindra's bowling, not so much as bowling figures. He averages, I think, 40 with the ball, but more just his regularity as a bowler. And I can tell you that Rachin Ravindra has played in 16 one-day internationals now. All of them have come this year. First 2 were against Sri Lanka and I think Auckland and Wellington or something. But anyway, in Aotearoa. And he didn't bowl in either of those 2 games. One of them he didn't even bat in, so that was fun. Free cap for nothing. Specialist fielder that day. But since then, remaining 14 games that he's played, all of them have been overseas, so that is a factor to say that he didn't bowl in the 2 games in New Zealand. But since then, he has played 14 games overseas. They've been in a variety of different countries. They've been to Pakistan, they've been to Bangladesh, they've been to England, they've been now currently in India. Multiple games he's played in all of those countries. He has bowled in 13 out of 14 innings. And the one time that he didn't bowl was the first ODI against Bangladesh, where nobody bowled because the second innings got rained off. So he bowls every time he plays for the Blackcaps. It doesn't mean he's like a strike bowler or anything, but I think we can put to bed the part-time thing. We already kind of had from a moral standpoint. Now we can say from like a factual standpoint, he's not a part-time bowler. If he's picked, he's going to bowl because he's picked to be an all-rounder.
When the Blackcaps absolutely destroyed England in the first game, after that, part of my debrief did feature some Ravindra bowling stats from the domestic summer. So you mentioned how he didn't bowl in the ODIs in New Zealand, but last summer in New Zealand, he was basically Wellington's busiest spinner. So he bowled the most Plunket Shield overs. He was second to Young Husband for Super Smash overs, and he bowled the most Ford Trophy overs. So he is Wellington's leading spinner last summer. He was Wellington's leading spinner. So that just seems like a nice little lead-in to then bowling a lot of spin overs overseas for the Blackcaps. And it's, again, because that was a lot of the storyline after that first game was like, whoa, the Blackcaps, what are they up to? These part-timers, that's a bit crazy. But we've been tracking the use of Glenn Phillips as a bowler a lot. He doesn't bowl as much as Ravindra, but he has developed his workload over the past few years.
Bowled in all 4 games so far as well.
Exactly. Like he might be a part-timer. Ravindra is certainly not. Ravindra is there to be an all-rounder.
Yeah.
And he bowls as much as he scores runs for Wellington. And at the Under-19 World Cup, when I think he was the leading run scorer in that tournament. Let me just double check that I did touch on this as well when I wrote about it a few weeks ago, which you can go read on our website, theniche-case.com. He was the busiest bowler at the Under-19 World Cup for the New Zealand team. And he took 13 wickets at an average of 22. And that World Cup was in New Zealand. So this just overlaps nicely with what you're saying, how he wasn't used as a bowler for ODIs in New Zealand this year. But he was Wellington's busiest bowler in New Zealand, and he was the busiest bowler for the Under-19s in a World Cup in New Zealand. So he's pretty good at bowling. I don't think he's the best bowler in the Blackcaps team. That's pretty obvious.
Certainly not top 4.
But he plays a role. And that role is pretty easy to play when you're bowling alongside Mitchell Santner. When Matt Henry is almost as good as Trent Boult. Because Trent Boult is an absolute wizard And now you've got Lockie Ferguson starting to find form. And this is especially like interesting when you think about how the like lower order runs are really important in this format, I reckon. And that means like Mitchell Santner and let's get some of the tournament stats here. Mitchell Santner's got 43 runs at a strike rate of 195. That's useful. Matt Henry's only got 10 runs, but he scores them at a strike rate of 250. That's useful. Mark Chapman, I believe, is in the team because he's quite good against spinners, as is Glenn Phillips, as is Daryl Mitchell, as is Will Young, as is Devon Conway, as is Tom Latham, as is Kane Williamson. But he's also hyper aggressive. That's why I dropped that strike rate stat earlier. The Blackcaps can score lower order runs. And when you ponder like Blackcaps mana and what makes the Blackcaps good at cricket, intangibles, good for like Mitchell Santner took a great catch. What did we say a few weeks ago, last week? Mitchell Santner's fielding in the circle. He also almost created a run-out opportunity. Glenn Phillips is in the circle. Like the Blackcaps weaponize their fielding. And we saw that against Afghanistan. But they also squeeze out as many runs as they can in the lower order. Afghanistan didn't do that.
Afghanistan dropped like 3 absolute sitters during that innings when we were batting, and that included like during the big Phillips Latham partnership, they dropped Latham a couple times. It's like you're going to lose if you do that.
Yeah. But I'm talking just about the batting. Muhammad Nabi 7 runs, Rashid Khan 8 runs, Mujib 4 runs, and then 2 ducks to finish. Like there's no
lose if you do that as well. Yeah,
there's no lower order runs there, but there's no lower order runs there because you've got someone like Lockie Ferguson bowling aggressively at the lower order. And how do you also dismiss lower order batters? A lot of spin. Like the general recipe to get tail-enders out is speed and spin. And that's what the Blackcaps can do in those areas. And as you said, the Blackcaps do not drop many catches. Other teams do drop catches. The Blackcaps are the best fielding team at this World Cup. Afghanistan is not one of the best fielding teams. And Afghanistan, shout out to them. Shout out to the nation of Afghanistan. Shout out to Afghanistan cricket. But this just really highlighted the difference between the Blackcaps and a lot of these other cricket teams, the big donnies of international cricket, let alone the nations who are trying to rise up. You got to excel at the basics because that's what the Blackcaps do. And once again, there's trendier players. There's sexier headlines. But the Blackcaps excel in the core fundamentals of cricket. That's why they are always a factor at the major tournaments, and that's why they are once again undefeated in a major tournament.
And have still never in their history lost to one of the supposed minnow nations. So I think they're up to like 25-0 now in all time, which is just about like, when I counted that, that's against all the non-test playing nations, and also I added in Netherlands, Zimbabwe, Afghanistan, Ireland, those kind of countries. We do actually, surprisingly, though, have a losing record against Sri Lanka at World Cups, which might only last another week or so because we can tie that up when we play Sri Lanka in a few games' time. The other thing that stuck with me from the Blackcaps so far through these 4 games, specifically with their batting, because I think we know the bowling is going to be a bit of a steady hands all around kind of approach. Everyone's very good, so it's not like one guy is going to come in there and Shane Bond their way through the top order and take 6 wickets, and everyone else is just trying to not embarrass themselves in relation to them. It's going to be more like a standard Blackcaps bowling a team out is what we saw against Afghanistan. It's like, you get 2 wickets, you get 2 wickets. You might get 3 wickets. This guy gets 1 wicket. This guy didn't get a wicket but created a couple chances. Another guy takes a wicket here. Like it's just sort of spreading the wealth around, which they've done extremely well because I believe they're now taken 38 out of a possible 40 wickets in the 4 games they've played, and have they'd only lost 10. I can't remember. Did they lose 7, 6, 7 against Afghanistan? I don't know, but again, they didn't get close to being bowled out, which has not happened at any point during these 4 games. Like they've kept wickets in hand, even when they were in danger, 4 down. Big partnership between Phillips and Latham, exactly what they needed, got them through to a score. Those guys began the blast offs towards the end, and they allowed Chapman and a little bit of Santner as well to come and finish it off. That's sharing the wealth around as well, but specifically with their batting, like the first game against England, hundreds for Conway and Ravindra. Second game, Will Young top scores. Third game, I think it was Williamson got a big 50 and Daryl Mitchell got an even bigger 50. Next game, it's Phillips and Latham. Like these are different top scorers every single time, you know. Like all of their guys in the top 6 have now got a 50+ score. Everyone looks in good touch. Everyone has, battered to the conditions and done what they needed to do. And the Blackcaps are just, it's different contributors every time, and that feels like the sign of a very good team. We'll see how that stacks up because they have played a couple of those sort of like weaker teams in a row. But those weaker teams, like Afghanistan beat England and Netherlands beat South Africa, so maybe they're not actually that weak. Maybe it's a tougher, particularly in Indian conditions, a tougher tournament than usual, where the margins for errors are a little slimmer. But the Blackcaps, because they excel at the basics, they take care of those things. That's what they've done so far. That's why they're 4-0.
2 last things here. Tom Latham has a strike rate of 100. That is New Zealand's test opener. He is one of, so let me see, 5 of the top 6 have strike rates over 100. And Tom Latham's one of them. So he's all right at cricket. And also, like, the worst batsman in this unit, we can probably agree, and many other folks will probably agree, is Will Young. The bloke who averages over 40 in one-day and list-day cricket, and he's got 250s. He is, who else has 250s? Tom Latham's got 250s. Ravindra's got a century and a 50. So, like, the worst batsman in this lineup, apparently Will Young, is just, solid. Maybe the worst batsman's actually Kane Williamson. Maybe Kane Williamson just needs to stay out of the team. We love you, Kane, but, like, how are you getting into this team, cuzzy? Plunket Shield
he's carrying
cricket.
Drinks. That's what he's doing.
Yeah. It's a pretty impressive drinks crew. Kane Williamson, Tim Southey, Ish Sodhi, Jimmy Neesham. It's a pretty good team. Like, you can just get some local lads just to play alongside those guys. Like,
yeah,
they'll be all right.
Williamson hasn't been dismissed since he did his knee, so
Yes. Plunket Shield cricket starts tomorrow. Northern Districts versus Otago is in Hamilton. Auckland versus Central is in Auckland. Wellington versus Canterbury is in Wellington. And the more I think about it, the more I just keep coming back to, like, how exciting Canterbury is. And that's just, like, respect to every other team, but it's like, I don't think Kyle Jamison's going to play because he's in that wider World Cup squad. But Canterbury might still roll out a seam bowling attack with Henry Shipley and Will O'Rourke at least. That alone is something that every Kiwi cricket fan should be tuned into. Because Will O'Rourke was a superstar of the A series against Australia. As far as the youngsters on the rise goes, like, Scott Kugelheim was the best player overall with Tom Bruce, I reckon. But Will O'Rourke is the young seamer with a bit of funk, a bit of pizzazz, a bit of X-factor, who took 2+ wickets in every single innings he bowled against Australia A. And he is likely to team up with Henry Shipley, who unfortunately has dipped down the leading ODI wicket takers for New Zealand this year rankings, because Matt Henry, Mitchell Santner, Trent Boult, they're all taking a lot more wickets over the last few games. But prior to the World Cup, Henry Shipley was the leading wicket taker in ODIs this year. You got those two. you got a pretty decent seam attack all round, to be honest. And I did write about this, like, so you can read about it on our website. They've brought in Michael Rippon from Otago, lefty leggy, and then you've got the batting with some of the best young talent in Aotearoa. Reese Mariu, Mitch Hay, let alone, fringy Blackcaps like Henry Nichols might be. Maybe Henry Nichols is in the wider squad. I don't know too much about that, the trio of players who are like touring with the Blackcaps, but there's a lot of talent in that Canterbury team, and their bowling unit is mandatory viewing at this stage, especially like early season. It's going to be in Wellington. Ball's going to be nibbling around. I reckon you're going to see that Canterbury seam attack on fire to start the season. Of course, Central Districts did have an epic season last year. Not last year, earlier this year. Josh Clarkson was a key player for them, so I'm curious how he starts this season. Because he's always had a lot of potential. He hadn't quite like built it out consistently across all three formats, but he was a key figure in Central winning the Plunket Shield last summer, which is a bit of a diversion for Clarkson because he was a consistent Super Smash player who hadn't really stepped up into Plunket Shield. And I'm always interested in Northern Districts. This is updated with Scott Kugelheim because of how good he was against Australia A. Tim Pringle's going to be an interesting spinner, lefty spinner. Like, in a weird roundabout way, you've got Tim Pringle becoming Mitchell Santner and you've got Aditya Ashok becoming Ish Sodhi. So where's the next young spinners for the Blackcaps? Well, Tim Pringle, Ashok, right there. Who's the next seamer for the Blackcaps? Henry Shipley, Will O'Rourke, right there in front of us. Northern Districts are just a good cricket team as well. Henry Cooper's been in the New Zealand A mixer. Joe Carter's been in the New Zealand A mixer. Probably going to get a bit of Wagner, Neil Wagner. Fascinated to see how Wagner performs. And then, of course, the two K Clarks. When I wrote this in my notes for the podcast, I was like, I just remember saying, like, talking about the K Clarks every single podcast last summer. Because Cartonet Clark is among the slickest, hyper-aggressive opening batters in Aotearoa. He is one of the best fielders in domestic cricket as well. Then you've got Christian Clark, who is a fantastic all-rounder. Good batter, good seamer, good cricketer. And I think there's a lot of, like, Northern don't have the standout prospecty talent that Canterbury has, but there's a lot of kind of Blackcaps wrinkles in that Northern team as far as like real super fringy lads goes, Wagner, Kugelheim, those characters, or the up-and-coming talent as well that you will see play for the Blackcaps in the coming years.
Yeah, that Canterbury lineup where they can just, I think you did a good job there because you mentioned the batting lineup, where the guys are like Mario and Hay, who are a bit more sort of like they've shown stuff at this level for sure, but they haven't necessarily just been around long enough to have the like sustained full season of look how good I am kind of cricket. And that's probably going to catch a few folks by surprise because you look at that Canterbury team and you can't look past a bowling lineup that has like, you didn't even mention like Michael Ray was with the New Zealand A's as well. Like they've got more good bowlers than they can fit. And they're all guys who are around the fringes of international cricket. And even the guys who aren't could be they're pretty good as well. They're going to be very good. Like it's hard not to think of that Canterbury team as the favourites going into the start of the season. They seem like they're the team that is the most well-rounded, and even the aspect of their game, the batting side, which maybe isn't as glamorous, might be just as good.
And I did forget the one and only Zach Folks.
Zach Folks,
who
another one.
He's a fantastic bowler, like a really exciting bowling prospect. But last Friday, Newsletter Dispatch, I chucked in a video highlight of him hitting a century in the Queensland T20 competition last year. And I think there's been a few lads, some from Canterbury, who have gone over to play in that kind of Brisbane area T20 competition, which is a high quality competition. Zach Folks whacked a century, and then he was opening the batting for Canterbury in their warm-up game against Otago. But he's a really good bowling prospect. That's Canterbury cricket. Quick little note here about Steven Adams. We will chat some Steven Adams on Monday, Nichecast as well, because the NBA season is starting. But I just wanted to offer some context around this season for Steven Adams, because we know that Steven Adams is really important for the Memphis Grizzlies. We know he didn't play last season, so we kind of know the Memphis Grizzlies will be better this season because Steven Adams is going to be playing. I would also throw out there is, I keep hearing it mentioned in all these NBA experts about Steven Adams being injury prone. Seems to me like he's just had one big injury from the last season. And it was a knee injury that, went on a while, but it's also a knee injury that basketball players might want to take care of. I don't think Steven Adams... Maybe this is just a good time to go check the season by season breakdown. 81 games, 70 games, 81 games, 70 games, 80 games, 80 games, 76 games, 80 games, 63, 58. That's a bit lower.
One of those was the COVID season where there were fewer games.
Yeah, so there is a bit of a dip there. 76 games, 42. So Steven Adams has played less than 60 games twice, one of which might have been a COVID year. Then he'll bounce back with 76 games. There's no injury-prone stuff there. And then he had a major impacted injury season with 42 games last season. So not sure where this idea about Steven Adams being injury-prone or battling health issues and stuff like that comes from, but the experts are saying it, so we'll believe it. The thing to pay attention with Steven Adams this season, before we get into the real basketball stuff, and which we might discuss in the upcoming podcast, again, all the experts were talking about Steven Adams, and a lot of the negative talk around Steven Adams did feature him being injury prone, which is a bit iffy, but it also revolved around his salary, because he signed a massive contract. And after his rookie contract, he signed a bigger contract that took him out to 22 million, 24 million, 25 million, 29 million in his last year of that contract, which was then with the Pelicans. That is a max salary type of contract. Then he signed a new contract with the Memphis Grizzlies for 17 million over the last 2 seasons. I don't know if this is another 2-year deal or if he signed a 4-year deal and the last 2 years just dropped.
I think there were 2 2-year extensions.
Right. So the second 2-year extension, he is on 12 million this season and 12 million next season. So Steven Adams has basically halved his salary from that max contract. So Steven Adams might offer the same level of value for half the salary. Meanwhile, the NBA salary cap is increasing. So it's roughly half, but then you add in how the NBA salary cap is increasing. It's definitely, offering great value for the Memphis Grizzlies, considering Steven Adams, one of the best rebounders in the NBA, considering how important Steven Adams is setting screens for. The Memphis Grizzlies players won't have Ja Morant to start the season, but when he's playing, it's Steven Adams who is clearing the path for Ja Morant to take a dunk. It's Steven Adams setting the screen so Desmond Bane can hit a three-pointer. It's Steven Adams doing all the dirty work to then allow Jaren Jackson Jr. to do his thing. Jaren Jackson Jr. wasn't so good at the World Cup because USA didn't have a Steven Adams. Neither did the Tall Blacks. If the Tall Blacks had a Steven Adams, they probably would have won as well. Won the whole tournament for sure. I find it interesting how Steven Adams, his salary is going down at a time where his value to the Memphis Grizzlies, I reckon, or his value to it, one of the teams he's played for in his career, is at an all-time high. I think Steven Adams for this Memphis Grizzlies team right now is more important than he was for the Pelicans and more important than he was for any of those Oklahoma City Thunder teams, which always had a fair amount of star power.
Yeah, that I'm just trying to think. Because he obviously he came over in the trade for James Harden for OKC, but like that's how they got the draft pick that became Steven Adams. So he didn't play with him. But like for the first 4, 5, 6 years of his career, I don't know how long exactly it would have been. Russell Westbrook in his prime and Kevin Durant nearing his prime. Durant sort of seems to have had a 15-year prime, so I don't know that that really statement really matters to him. But he had those guys around him that whole time. I'm just trying to think who like Serge Ibaka was the third best player on that team for a little while. There would have been a time certainly where maybe it was that last year that Durant was there where maybe Adams might have had a claim to be the third best dude. But
It's not about the best dude, it's about his importance.
yeah, well, that actually makes it stronger for the Adams case because that was a bit of a that was when they had that this is when they had the playoff run to the Western Conference Finals, and then Durant went and signed with the Warriors after they beat them in 7 straight after. You know that run, Adams was really good for them, and yeah, like that's. I think he's probably more important to this Grizzlies team now than he was to that Thunder team then as well. Like, and that's it is a sneaky thing because that's kind of when he earned his big contract, and now he's been through those years. He's had to go through a couple of years where, like the year with the Pelicans, where it wasn't such a great fit. The Van Gundy stuff just didn't quite work, even though he signed him for a reason. He couldn't get that to be successful, and then Zion Williamson was always injured, and people look at Steven Adams and say he's overpaid, he's underperforming, sort of thing, and then he's just doing the same thing he's always done. And then he goes to the Grizzlies where it fits so much better and they unlock him, let him be more of a passer. And he's still doing the same thing. He's putting as much work in as he always has. And suddenly he looks underpaid. And then having looked underpaid, he begins to be paid less. On top of that, still doing the same thing. And he's not injury prone. He picks up a lot of bumps and bruises, but he doesn't pick up like muscle injuries, which I think is the key thing when you're looking at someone who's injury prone is the guys who might just pull a hamstring any given day. He gets like bruises and contusions and the odd head knock and things like that, which you got to sit out a couple games at a time when that happens. But you don't have to sit out a month at a time when that happens. He's had very few extended like multi-week absences in his career, and he's only had one long-term injury, and he's coming off it, and he looks fine. Like he looks all right. They've limited minutes in preseason, and they've not played him sort of the back-to-back games, just every second time. But in the sort of 10 to 15 minutes they're giving him, he looks like Steven Adams. He doesn't look like he's holding back. He doesn't look restricted or anything like that. He looks like the same dude. It's just a matter of building up his workload again. And the thing about when he is suddenly being paid 10 million less than what they might, well, certainly than what the Pelicans paid him in the last year. I think the Grizzlies got him on the extension where he was sort of in the 15 to 18 range, and now he's in around the 12 range. Fifth highest paid player on the Grizzlies right now. He was, I think, second when he first got there. I think Jaren Jackson Jr.'s extension might have just kicked in, or it might have been the year after. I don't know, but he's down the charts there. And when you saving money on a starting player like that, you can spend that money elsewhere. You know, you don't have to pocket it. You spend it elsewhere. And that's how they're able to get someone like Marcus Smart to come in a trade. They have the cap room to absorb a guy like Marcus Smart or Luke Kennard last year, who's also being paid. Both those guys are on salaries higher than Adams. They traded for those guys within the last 12 months. And they're key players for them. Kennard's their best three-point shooter. Marcus Smart is expected to be the dude who comes in and does the defensive stuff that Dillon Brooks used to do, but whilst being a better character than Dillon Brooks and someone who won't take 30 shots a game when he's not making any of them. And they've had a Derek Rose, who the same thing applies to Derek Rose. It's a veteran guard who's well, even more so because Rose is getting like 3 million this year. You know, he's just playing because he loves basketball at this point. He's where Adams will be in like 5 years' time, which is interesting for Adams. He's no longer the oldest player on this team. Derek Rose is coming and taking that mantle, but that's all good. Like that's good cap management because what this is also aligned with is they've had homegrown players. Jaren Jackson Jr. They drafted him. Ja Morant, they drafted him. Those guys have got big extensions. As those guys have got big extensions because they're really good and they've come in and earned those things, as their money has gone up, Adams's has gone down, which has allowed them to keep the same balance in the team, which means they can continue to have, like, they can have continuity year on year on year. And all they have to do coming into this season is be like, well, we're going to get a couple veteran guards, one defensive minded one, and one sort of like sort of floor general, former MVP, who you can say like we're just trying we're getting guys who are going to bring the best out of what we've already got, guys who can do what Adams does for the front court and for the back court with a screen game as well. Guys who can do that in their own way as well, and then see where they go because this is a good Memphis team. Ja Morant's not playing the first month or so. But once he comes back, I don't expect him to be any worse than he was before, and they've got a more stable side around him. A lot of that has to do with having leaders like Steven Adams there who is selfless in how he plays, but also selfless in like he's not going out there and demanding every last dollar in his contracts. He knows he's in the best fit. He's been in that situation where he's not in that kind of place before, being paid more. And he knows it's better to be paid a little bit less to be in a team where you can win stuff. And that's what he's doing. And that's why the Memphis Grizzlies are good right now.
I agree. We'll check in with Steven Adams over the next couple of weeks. It will be interesting to see how the Memphis Grizzlies start without Ja Morant because a good start for the Memphis Grizzlies in which they win as many games as they lose or, hover around that kind of 500 mark, it's going to involve a lot of great Steven Adams stuff. If the Memphis Grizzlies are holding steady without Ja Morant, Steven Adams is going to be in the spotlight. Let's get into rugby league here because we've got a busy weekend of footy. Saturday is going to be a massive day. You got New Zealand A versus Tonga A. Still waiting on a team list for that game. One would assume Nofahu White, Wiremu Greg, Danny Levi, and Keanu Kinney will drop out of the Kiwis squad and then go into that New Zealand A team. I did another plug for our newsletter. I did write this on, might have been last Friday as well. There's been all this talk about Michael Maguire as New South Wales coach, right? And there's a bit of the reason why that won't happen is because there's a conflict of interest. What's if there's a player from New South Wales who wants to play for the Kiwis or a Kiwis player taken out of the New South Wales? The damage has already been done. Because Michael Maguire selected two of the best young Queensland prospects to go into the New Zealand A squad. Jack Howard and Ben Takura. Yes, Trey Mooney, he also played for New South Wales under-19. He played against Jack Howard. He played against Takura. But Michael Maguire, perhaps the next New South Wales coach, has brought in two of the best young Queensland players into the Kiwis camp. That's pretty interesting. The Kiwis take on Samoa. I will shout out, another little weird thing I saw was how the New Zealand media have this fetish of players who are born in New Zealand. So there was a yarn about how the eligibility needs to be sorted out. It's Junior Bolo, Stephen Crichton, they were born in New Zealand. Spencer Leniu is born in New Zealand. They should be playing for New Zealand or whatever. They were just born in New Zealand. They left to Australia pretty quickly. They're not necessarily. I don't think they feel any type of way about Aotearoa, and nor would I if I was born in New Zealand and then left to go to Australia in their position. But then again...
Well, it reminds me of the thing in the basketball where the Cairns Taipans have Aaron Baines and Tyrell Harrison as their front court, where Baines is a hardy Australian, but he was born in New Zealand. Harrison is a hardy Kiwi, but he was born in Australia. Which one's playing for which national team?
well, that's just more like the weird stuff. You can't predict any eligibility thing because,
No,
again,
you,
Jack
you can't.
Howard,
That's
Ben
exactly why
Chikura,
you can't have a
Trey
blanket
Mooney,
rule.
they all have some sort of like Māori lineage or whatever. But even then, like Kalen Ponga's straight up Māori, doesn't want to play for Aotearoa. So you've got like female players like Kennedy Cherrington. They're Māoris who are born and raised in Australia who want to play for Australia. So it's just like this isn't a fault of anyone. It's just the murky trying to predict these things is very murky because you've got someone like Shanice Parker, born and raised in Australia, Kiwi Fern, who's got some, she's half Māori. She wants to play for Aotearoa. But then you've got Māoris who are born and raised in Australia who want to play for Australia. So it's like you've got Māoris on both sides who do and don't want to play for Aotearoa, but then you've got different cases. Like, it's all very strange, and you just have to go on the decisions of the individual.
Yeah.
All of which is to say, Samoa only have 2 Kiwi NRL juniors. Like Murray Taulagi, he was a Otahuhu rugby junior, but he's opting to represent Australia, so he's not in my Kiwi NRL equation, and he did leave Aotearoa at a young age. Dejan Arce, Aranui Junior from Christchurch, and Connolly Lemuelu from Tangaroa College in Otara. So with Dejan Arce at halfback for Samoa, you've got 3 Kiwi Samoans in this game from Christchurch. That is a pretty significant wrinkle, given the rise of rugby league in the South Island. If we add Griffin Neame, then we've got another South Island player as well. Connolly Lemuelu, edge forward for Samoa. He's obviously with the Redcliffe Dolphins. I love what he's done with the Redcliffe Dolphins this season. And then we get into the Kiwis team. Matthew Tomoko named at centre to make his debut. Fa'amanu Brown will make his debut, one of the Kiwi Samoans from Christchurch. He is a Hornby junior. Jermaine Sako's the other one. He is a Aranui junior, so you might have Dejan Arce and Jermaine Sako, 2 Aranui juniors from Christchurch. Griffin Neame and Leo Thompson are named to make their debuts off the bench. As far as like funky things here, interested to see what role Joseph Manu plays. I expect him to roam around a wee bit. Michael Maguire has swapped between Shans Nickel-Klukstar at fullback and Joey Manu at centre. So last year it was more Joey Manu at fullback, Nickel-Klukstar playing centre. But then this season, Nickel-Klukstar was fantastic at fullback for the Warriors, and Joey Manu spent the whole season at centre. So this just makes more sense given how the season played out. Curious to see how Dylan Brown and Jerome Hughes go in the halves. Dylan Brown from Whangarei, Jerome Hughes from Wellington. So you've got 2 players from Whangarei or Northland in the team. Wiremu Greg's just outside the team. He's from Whangarei. And you've got the 3 players from Wellington, Jerome Hughes, Joseph Tapine, Asafa Solomona. And I love there's just a core 4 of Kiwis forwards right now, because you have shed some of the veterans out of this team. Hold that thought. Fisher Harris and Moses Leota starting props, Joseph Tapine starting 13, then Nelson Asafa Solomona off the bench. That quartet of forwards is pretty exciting. They are the leaders of the Kiwis. Fisher Harris is the captain. He's got his mate Moses Leota right there. Joseph Tapine and Asafa Solomona's experienced test players as well. Oh man, that quartet is just like, you can kind of sprinkle, you're sprinkling in high quality players because it is the Aotearoa Kiwis, but as long as you've got those 4 there, I think you're going to go all right. You're going to do pretty well. And watch out for Asafa Solomona maybe playing edge forward, because Griffin Neame and Leo Thompson are probably going to come off the bench through the middle. And Asafa Solomona could play in the middle. Neame or Thompson could play on an edge. But for the Storm and the Kiwis, last year at the World Cup, Asafa Solomona has played a lot of edge forward over the past season. Kieran Foran is the Grizzly veteran of the team. And it is a credit to Kieran Foran. He always plays Kiwis football. He is basically now Michael Maguire's bench utility. Like, he's played that role in the top 17 Kiwis teams over the past year. And he is an amazing rugby league player when you consider, like, he made his debut, I think it might have been 2009. He made his Kiwis debut at centre. So he played centre, then he did a little stint. He played halves for the most of his Kiwis career, and then he settled into like a bench utility role under Michael Maguire. And I think he's almost at 30 tests for Aotearoa. I thought he might be like near the top of Kiwis appearances, but there's like quite a prestigious history of Aotearoa Kiwis Rugby League, and dudes have played over 40 tests, like 50 tests, 60 tests. So he's got a wee way to go there, and he's probably not going to play for another 5 years. So we'll enjoy Kieran Foran while he's there, but just his mana for the Kiwis is undeniable. And I do think like there is a core leadership group, Joey Manu, Jerome Hughes, the forwards I mentioned. But right now, Foran's the kaumatua of the team. And then you've got the leadership. So like, if I'm using these terms correctly, you've got Kieran Foran, kaumatua, and then you've got the leaders as the Matua Fisher Harris type of thing. And they take on Samoa. So it'll be a very interesting game. Obviously, Samoa lost to Australia last week. All the buzz will be around Samoa. The crowd will be Samoan. The streets will be Samoan. Auckland is the Polynesian capital of the world. You do have like a pretty niggly situation as far as Samoan nationalism goes. Manu Brown, Samoan international. Danny Levi, Samoan international. Asafa Solomona's talked up playing for Samoa. Papali'i's Samoan. But you do have Isako Samoan. You do have a lot of Samoan Kiwis in the team. And then you've got, but interesting, you've got someone like Moses Leota. He plays with Stephen Crichton. He plays with Jerome Luai. He plays with Spencer Leniu. In this Panthers group of Samoans who are leading the revolution of Samoan Rugby League. But Moses Leota is playing alongside Fisher Harris for the Kiwis. That just, again, highlights how we can't have any opinion on who someone else what team they want to represent. And while I'm on a roll, I'll just keep firing because we've got the Kiwi Ferns taking on Tonga. This, respect to Tonga, this should be an easier game for the Kiwi Ferns. And there are some very interesting selections. So changes, you've got Shanice Parker at fullback. Shael Robbins-Retty makes her debut on the wing, and Abigail Roach comes into centre. She comes into centre, and Robbins-Retty's on the wing. So Anessa Biddle is named at edge forward. So this season, in her debut campaign of NRLW, Anessa Biddle played wing. She commanded an opportunity at centre. Now she's playing edge forward for the Kiwi Ferns. That's just it's part of an amazing year for Anessa Biddle, Otara Jr. And also we've got Tyler Nathan Wong starting in the halves. I think I laid out this vibe on Monday in our Nichecast episode then, but like Tyler Nathan Wong is amazing. Exceptional at rugby, exceptional at footy. And I'm really excited to see her starting in the halves alongside her Dragons homie, Racine McGregor. You've also got Capri Paikau. She is a hooker from Te Awa Mutu who played for the Eels. She is named on the bench to make her debut. And Tiana Davison, the sister of Carlin Davison, young New Zealand Breakers player. She's named on the bench to make her debut as well. So I think you've got a bit of rotation for the Kiwi Ferns. And it's going to be a very exciting game to see some of these young players step up, and especially Biddle playing edge forward. Because then she is a very powerful runner, but you're also opening up one of the outside back positions for Robbins-Retty or Abigail Roach, who are certified Kiwi Ferns starting talents. But I also like Sean Albert Jones. I thought she's been one of the best edge forwards in NRLW. She was fantastic to start the game against Australia. So she's really good as well. So this is the Kiwi Ferns depth available.
Beauty. So the New Zealand A game, is that a like a double header situation where they playing before the Kiwis?
They play before the Kiwi Ferns, and then
Ah,
the Kiwi Ferns play before the Kiwis.
so triple header.
Triple header.
Hey, so yeah, that does lend a bit more like credence to the idea that the excess Kiwis will probably be available for the NZAs if they're all in the same place and no one has to travel anywhere or anything like that. That makes sense. That's what those games are there for anyway. So yeah, no, that's a ridiculously stacked weekend again. After we had a ridiculously stacked weekend last week of Kiwi sports, and now it seems like we're going to have an even more ridiculously stacked weekend, which I think is Labor Weekend, isn't it? I think it's a long weekend too. That'll
Yeah,
come in handy.
might be a national weekend.
Hey,
Shout out to the Pakeha Crips. They defeated the Pakeha Bloods in the national elections. So it was good to see the all the white folks rallying behind their colours in the election. Rugby league, good rugby league. Did go deep into the New Zealand A squad last week. Also got the write-up about the New Zealand A squad. As I said, there's those players with interesting eligibility futures to watch out for because, they're in Kiwis camp. Social media, they all look like they're loving being in Kiwis camp. Doesn't look like they're there for the experience. It looks like they're there to represent the Kiwis in the future. And shout out Michael Maguire, just robbing State of Origin. Should we get into football? Because we got two Wellington Phoenix games. How good. We got the Wellington Phoenix against the Western Sydney Wanderers, men and women. The men play first, the women play second. Let's just start with the women because they're bouncing back after their first game. We did debrief their game against Melbourne City, so check that out on the Monday Niche Cast. What are you expecting from the Western Sydney Wanderers? Are they better or worse than Melbourne City?
they should be worse. They lost 2-0 to Sydney in week 1, and that was Sydney are defending champions, so there is that aspect of Sydney were better than Melbourne City last year. But I don't think that's going to be true necessarily again this year. I think Sydney, as often happens when teams win the A-League, they then lose 3 or 4 of their best players to European clubs, and Sydney have done a little bit of that. So they've restocked quite nicely. No New Zealanders in their ranks though, so not nicely enough. Sydney will be one of the better teams, but they did beat Western Sydney 2-0. I don't know if I got any stats on this thing. I don't. Western Sydney.
Millie Clegg, she signed with Western Sydney, but she's not allowed to play.
Yes, yeah, that's where I'm coming to next. Is that they did have Malia Steinmetz last year, who was moved overseas to play for FC Nordjylland in Denmark, and they signed Millie Clegg from the Phoenix, but Millie Clegg doesn't turn 18 until start of November, I think it is. And the rules are in FIFA, if you move country before the age of 18, you're not allowed to play professionally or something like that, which is, even though she, I think, is on an amateur deal, which I didn't think would be the case, but I have seen it reported that it is, which I thought, like, after your first A-League season, okay, we'll stay amateur, leave open the college career if I decide for it. Seems that's still something she's at least not taken off the table, which I would, on one hand, I would say heartily disrecommend, whatever the opposite of recommend is, dissuade her from doing that. I think she's far too good to be playing youth football for 4 more years. However, I think because she's far too good, it doesn't matter. Better options will come along, so it's irrelevant now. But yeah, even though she's played a full season for the Wellington Phoenix in the same league, she's not allowed to play until the week 3 for Western Sydney. So she didn't play last week, won't play this week. I think she turns up in round 3 where they play on the 5th of November. She must have had a birthday before then. So we won't have Millie Clegg up against the Phoenix this week, which takes away another aspect of I don't know. It was a Kiwi striker who scored the winning goal against them last week. You don't have to worry about that this week. So it's a good opportunity for the Phoenix to be like, okay, we had that first game. We've tried to shake things up. We're going with this new small ball kind of system. We want to lots of short passes. We want to play our way out of tight situations and then expand and run at teams. And didn't quite work because we were playing a really good team and it was the first opportunity we had to do this. But Wanderers is a better test, I think, a better example of getting to see what they've been building towards. And it won't be the finished product, but I think it'll be it'll be more what's the word? More emblematic of what they're building towards than what we saw in week 1.
What stood out to you as far as like identity or playing style? Like this is how the Wellington Phoenix women are going to play their football. There wasn't Annalie Longo, who's probably going to be really important as far as that identity and playing style goes. But did you have any like major takeaways as far as this is Wellington Phoenix women football for the 2023 season?
Well, Coach Paul Temple did say afterwards he felt like they gave the ball away a little bit too easily in their possession stuff, which is probably true, admittedly against a very good defensive team in Melbourne City. But there were flashes where there was, sort of, I guess when you're trying to play short passes, you don't have to expand the field so much. You can afford to go for little overloads in midfield. You've got 3 players in a tight area, 1, 2, another layoff to this person, third one, like the off-ball third runner is coming through, and then you've played your way out of there kind of thing. And there wasn't a lot of that, but there was enough to see that that's what they're trying to do. So you get like glimpses of that. And Macy Fraser, I thought, was quite good at that because she's someone who seems to be able to play that sort of like, again, something Paul Temple said afterwards about Kate Taylor playing in defensive midfielder is that she's used to being a centre back where everything happens in front of her. And if it's not, she's chasing back in a straight line because the goal's under threat. In midfield, you got to play 360 degrees. You got to be aware of your options on all sides. I think Macy Fraser was someone who, for her first A-League game, showed a good sense of that. And we'll be curious to see what that looks like when Annalie Longo comes in. Does she come in for Fraser or does she come in for not? Because if you think Fraser and Longo gives you more sort of passing and creativity, but not gives you, or Wisniewski for that matter, give you a bit more sort of defensive solidarity and sort of just like covering the turf and getting around. Plus, I've said several times, I think Wisniewski is a goal-scoring threat from midfield and is going to get plenty of them this season, as long as she's starting games a bit more often. Or she's coming off the bench. Maybe my prediction of 5+ goals isn't going to happen, but it's glimpses of that. And then I guess once you play out of those areas, you win the ball, you pass your way out of pressure, and then you try to hit the team quickly. Like before they have time to get into their shape, you're trying to get like a runner down the wing or something, or striker drops in to collect and then lays it off and then is through on goal, or that kind of stuff where it's relatively direct, but not like direct in a way where you're just pumping the ball long. It's direct in that you're just quick passing, 1-2 touch kind of stuff. I think that's what we're in line to see a bit more from this team this season. And I mean, one aspect we talked about on Monday was that we didn't actually see that much from the outfield imports in the first game. So I think having them had their first little like testing of the waters kind of performances, Speckmeyer only coming off the bench because she's still building up her fitness after an injury. Like, if they, I mean, obviously, if they play at that level throughout, we're not going to see much different than what we got. But I'm pretty confident those players will get better as they play more often and settle into the team and what they're trying to do. So I think that's another scope for them improving, is just getting that getting a little bit more out of their inputs than we got in the first round. Which, again, admittedly, all these problems that might have been there in week 1 might just simply be to do with the fact that they played what might be the best team in the competition first up.
Is Vandermeer a Kiwi?
She certainly is Cantabrian.
So, and Mackenzie Berry is Cantabrian as well, right?
No, Mackenzie Berry's from New Plymouth, I think, from
She
the
played
central
for
region
Canterbury.
anyway. No, she moved to Auckland because that was when they were doing the FFDP stuff. So she moved to Auckland for that and played for like Northern, I think, for a bit.
Are they like the starting centre back duo for you? Because I thought they were both really good.
Yeah, I think they probably are, particularly if Kate Taylor, Cantabrian, is playing center midfield, sort of like, defensive midfield. That does free up that opportunity. Although Rebecca Lake, Cantabrian, is also a very good centre back who I think so all the centre backs are Cantabrian except Mackenzie Barry, it seems.
And the
Um,
Seamers.
and the seamers, all the centre backs and seamers, that's what Canterbury produces. Hawke's Bay has wine, Canterbury has seamers and centre backs. So I think Rebecca Lake is an excellent player who's, I think, slightly older than those other two. Might be the same age as Barry, but I think a year or two older, um, and has been like a veteran at the age of 24 in the National League, just consistently one of the very best defenders year in year out for quite a while. Captain Canterbury for the last couple of years. She's new on the scene at this level, so I expect that's something that might take a few weeks. But I do think there is scope for that if she did get in off the bench. It's also something where if you wanted to play a back three, there you go. You got three good centre backs. There's options.
My interpretation and perception and read of the Wellington Phoenix Men has been one of a development club. Obviously, for the new season, a lot of younger players, a lot of players from coming up within the system, and every club or sports team franchise in this part of the world, the best example is the Penrith Panthers. We've talked about the Warriors kind of operating that Penrith Panthers system, and you've kind of teased the comparison between the Wellington Phoenix and the Warriors as far as moving towards their youth system development pathway structure. Football does have the benefit for NRL clubs to do that is salary cap management. The benefit for football clubs to do it is that you get money because
Transfer fees, yeah.
you develop the player, then you get the transfer fee, and there's also this thing in football like you might get residual transfer fees for a certain player who moves between 5 different clubs and then gets a massive contract. The first club still gets some transfer fee money. So there's a financial benefit and also just a holistic benefit of like these players come from the Wellington Phoenix system. These players are always available and you can I'm sure there's still some sort of salary cap management aspect for the Phoenix in the A-League. Is that correct? And in terms of like, this is what to expect from the Wellington Phoenix Men this season, a younger group, a lot of players from Aotearoa, a lot of development opportunities that might not necessarily correlate to a lot of wins.
Yeah, short answer to the question is that, yeah, they seem to be very much of a development club right now at this phase, and that seems to be something that they've decided is just the way forward, like permanently from this point on. And there are it's I mean, it's a weird one because the director of football, Sean Gill, who was like director of operations and now seems to be a different role. I don't know how things go, but good club man who's been there for quite a while. I'm sure I mentioned this before, but he did like a 10-minute little interview in-house clip thing talking about the new direction of the club on their YouTube, which is unprompted. Like he didn't have to do that, which makes you think like, why did he do that? Well, it's to come out in front and get people aware of like the journey, the strategy of like pretty much to answer the question that fans were having of why aren't they signing any bloody players? What are they going to do with that last import spot? They're just going to leave it open? How come the only two guys from outside the club that they've brought in this year have been, backup players from the Newcastle Jets who are in a little bit of a mess and were, guys ready to move around? And those guys might not even be necessarily starters for the Phoenix. It's not like they're coming in and being like locked on, we're improving the standard of the club kind of players. They everyone else they've signed has been an internal promotion. It's completely just. I wrote like a couple months ago about how it seemed like they're going to be leaning on the academy a little bit more. How they're going to be boosting up this stuff. We're going to see more debutants. We're going to see more integration between first team and reserves. What I didn't expect was going to be like complete integration. It's just going on that as far as they can. One of the things that Gil said in that little video is that it was a sneaky little note that I made sure to write down to remember, to remind myself, is that he did sort of offhand mention that they kind of used up all their budget already for this team. And I know some of that will be because they've put in more money into the women's team, which needed to happen, so that's fine. But that also seems like, how have you lost Clayton Lewis and Ollie Sale and Steven Ugarkovic and a couple others, Callan Elliott? Have you lost players, replace them with reserves, and still run out of money? And I like that can only suggest that either the budget's been cut or the second year contracts that they gave the returning imports, of which there are 4 imports who are coming back, which is it's a good thing and a rare thing that you get that many. The Wellington Phoenix have 4 imports this season who were with them last season. The New Zealand Breakers have never retained an import since the ownership change. They've not had a single import play more than 1 season for them. That's a bit of a wild contrast, but maybe they had massive kickers on their contract, like backloaded them so that they return. So we'll pay you even more in the second year if you want to sign another one. Maybe that's the case. I don't know, but it also seems like they're just trying to run on less money than they have in the past. And when they're doing that, that means you got to go on the academy. But it's not the worst time to be leaning on the academy because the academy is in a pretty good place at the moment. So it's a strategy that's opened up because of the good work that they've, and I'm sure some of that money as well would have been diverted into the operations below the first team too, in order to make sure the players come through in as good a situation as possible. There are some pretty good players there. There's a few where I'm like, we'll see how they go at the A-League level. Like, can they step up? But there's also a couple where I'm pretty confident they can at least contribute positively, if not being like the best player in their position in the league or anything like that. You guys who can come in and do a job. And there's a few established ones. This has been an ongoing thing. There's been every year a couple of new guys who come through the academy and make it into the first team. They're just pushing that a little bit further this time. One of your last points there is maybe the most pertinent, though, is can you win doing that? Can you win immediately? And I like the comparison with the Penrith Panthers because I think that's the best case scenario, is that you can do what the Panthers did and have a bunch of, like, many of them locals, others recruited from outside, from New Zealand, from overseas, from elsewhere in Australia, but most importantly, brought through their system into the first team that way, and then become the dynastic team of the NRL with this, of this century probably at this point. That's the best case scenario. Don't think the Wellington Phoenix quite have that in the bag, but there it is. Does goes to show, like, Central Coast Mariners won the league last year with a lot of youth teams or just like players who weren't getting a chance at other clubs. Even like James McGarry is a good example of someone who bounced around a couple teams and then found a 6-month home at Central Coast. Did so well that they sold him to a Scottish Premiership club for a good fee. The fee thing is a little bit overblown, in that just because a player comes through the academy, plays the first team, doesn't mean you're going to get transfer fee for him. Only the very best players are going to be able to be sold for transfer fees. And even then, you have to be careful to make sure they're under contract when it comes time to leave, or else they're just leaving a free and you don't get much. Maybe a little bit of compensation, I think, for academy players, but that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about being able to, I don't know, maybe once a year, be able to sell the best academy player for a 6-figure sum, which then they can put back into the running costs of the club and help make it sustainable in that way. It's a good economic way to to work it if you can make it work, because there's so much money in world football, and most of it's not at the Wellington Phoenix. So you might as well get some of that wealth like reinvested back our way. If guys are playing like, Premier League clubs are haggling over tens of millions of dollars in differences for transfer fees, we might as well get a couple 100,000 for like Sam Sutton or whoever. And they have done this. Like that, it's not like they just decided to do this all of a sudden and let's see if it works. They sold Sarpreet Singh, they sold Libby Kikache, they sold Ben Waite. Three best examples of players, like the three best players who've come through their academy. But that's the point: is the best players are the ones that draw the fees, and then that one Libby Kikache for a year or whatever, pays the cost for the rest of the reserve team to come through, so that one of them can be the guy next year, sort of thing. So it's a new strategy. I do respect that they've defined it really well, though. Like, it's not something they're sort of half in, half out. They've at least said, like, no, this is what we're doing. We are clear about it. This is how we want to operate. But yeah, again, the point: can you win games like that? Certainly, at first, I think it's going to be hard. But a lot just depends on how quickly some of these guys, who we don't know if they're going to settle into the A League quickly or not, we'll see that. And they do have a new coach who has some big ideas of how they want to play. And what we saw from them against Melbourne City in the Aussie Cup was probably only like 10% of what they're building towards. That was early in preseason. They've had like 6-7 weeks since then to continue building and add to that and take the lessons from that game and implement them. And we'll see how it goes, because they will be development teams are also project teams. It takes time. Expect that from the Wellington Phoenix, but I mean, a lot of that is also just unknowns. It's not an automatic that they're going to struggle. Some of these guys might be really good at a young age. There's plenty of A-League players who have done that in the past. So we'll just have to wait and see, I suppose. But just people do need to understand, though, with the Phoenix, is that is their sort of operating method from this point on now.
And I can understand like trepidation or concern about that as far as the wins go. The other best example is the White Ferns, because they skew towards that development route. But there's nothing, like, as I always say, those young players have no confidence. There's nothing for them to hang their head on from the domestic circuit and be like, I can do this at an international level. They're forced to do it having not done anything at domestic cricket level. So I do see a major difference as far as, because I do say when you don't select your best team and you select development players, your chances of winning decrease. I've said that a lot of times about the White Ferns, but they ignore the development steps. The thing that I am excited about for the Wellington Phoenix, as you said, they've produced really good local players consistently throughout their existence. And in the same thing about the Warriors are skewing towards a development organization at a time where the rugby league players from Aotearoa are really, really good. You're seeing that with the Kiwis team. You're seeing it with the New Zealand A team. You're seeing it with my Kiwi NRL stuff I mentioned all the time. That's also happening in Kiwi football. So I think the Wellington Phoenix aren't skewing younger with crappy younger players. They're skewing younger with really good football players from Aotearoa who have also competed in the National League. They've gone through all the development steps to get to A-League football, to professional football. And I understand the concern. I understand any wariness about this process, but given the state of Kiwi football, I think it's a pretty exciting kind of juncture for the Wellington Phoenix, which does bring us into National League football to finish our podcast. I just had a quick squiz at the some of the games this weekend. We got the Auckland Derby. The women's Auckland Derby. So you got West versus East, West Side versus East Side, Western Springs, Grey Lynn versus Kohimarama, the gritty suburbs of Auckland. They face each other, which is
The
cool.
dangerous streets.
They're both top 4 teams. And then you've also got a Wellington little derby there as well, with Wellington Phoenix Women taking on the CF Wellington United, which also sounds gang related. The men's side, you've got
More mean streets.
Auckland United versus Wellington Olympic. Wellington Olympic are second, Auckland United are third. That seems like the big Donny game. And another little Auckland encounter, Eastern Suburbs versus Auckland City. I'm not sure how you want to do this, but take us through some of your highlights for this weekend's football. Let's start with the women.
Well, one thing about the draw this week is there's a Thursday night game tonight, which is Ellerslie against Auckland United. Then there's I think that Western Springs versus Eastern Suburbs, the Mean Streets derby, is on Friday night. So they're spreading it right out throughout the weekend, which is good for me. If games are being played earlier, I can watch them earlier, which means I can write about them earlier, which means I can get the thing published earlier. So grateful for that. I dig that match. I think that those two men's games you mentioned, though, are the ones to really like pop off on this coming weekend. Where are we on here? Just checking who's home and who's away. So yeah, Auckland United hosting Wellington Olympic. Those are two clubs who could be making the top 2. Like there's been points dropped across the board. Wellington Olympic, I think, drew their last 2 games, didn't they? And Auckland United have had they had a comeback draw against Christchurch United, which is taking points of Christchurch United as well. And it's a bit wide open for that second spot. So 3 points in the rare games where those teams get to play against each other, which short league, you're only playing every other team once. Like that's a massive points on offer between Auckland United and Wellington Olympic. Eastern Suburbs haven't won yet. They've drawn 3 of their 4 games. They were undefeated in the winter season. They didn't win the league despite being undefeated, though. That's because Auckland City were also undefeated, which means that for them both to have been undefeated, neither of them could have beaten each other. It means they both drew both times they played, which is indeed what happened. The Eastern Suburbs and Auckland City have drawn twice so far this year. It's the 3rd time they played each other. I thought Auckland City, I was looking at, because on Tribe Sports now, they chuck up, I guess they've got a partnership with TAB, and they chuck up odds on the games on like the day beforehand when that comes live. And they said that, I'm not someone who gambles on sports or whatever, but I did see that they had Cashmere Tech as $7 outsiders against Auckland City. I know it was at Kiwis Street, but I'm thinking like, Auckland City haven't impressed me as much as they usually do this season. They've found a way in every game because that's what Auckland City do. But there's upset potential there against Cashmere Tech, even at home. And sure enough, Cashmere Tech were 1-0 up with about 20 minutes to go in that game. They ended up losing 3-1 because, again, Auckland City always find a way. Second comeback win in a row for Auckland City. But against the defensive unit of Eastern Suburbs, which is really good, and maybe also with Lewis Toomey giving a little bit of the magic sprinkles on top, there's potential for Auckland City to drop some points there. And if they do suddenly drop points and one of those other teams start winning, then the top 2 race suddenly doesn't become everyone else competing for who plays Auckland City. It becomes like, well, if City drop points against another team, like if they lose to Wellington Olympic later on in the season, well, maybe they don't make the final. Like that's the kind of implications you get in such a short season, is that every game matters massively. And you don't really get very many opportunities to make up for the ones that you don't win. So I'm curious how an Eastern Suburbs team that hasn't been great to start, but I think they've got better as they go along. Missing a sort of goal-scoring centre forward, which is their issue. But, big fan of Lewis Toomey. So after he's set up a couple of goals, he's played, I think, I had a stat about it. He's played, I think, 113 minutes out of what's 390 times 4 is 360. So he's played about a third of their minutes. He didn't play the first 2 games, came off the bench in the 3rd game, played most of the 4th game. They've scored 4 goals Eastern Suburbs. He's set up 3 of them, and he's only played in a third of the minutes of the season so far.
Is he too good for National League, or is he a National League trooper?
He is ex-Wellington Phoenix, about a year or two removed. Might have even played for them last year. I can't remember exactly. So he's only 21, 22 at the oldest. He's probably too good for National League, but I think he maybe needs to show that outside of the Phoenix realms to nail that down, which hopefully he's starting to do. He did go to Finland for a little bit and played lower tier stuff in Finland after he left the Phoenix at first. So he's a little bit of experience overseas, and I would imagine at some point is angling towards something like that again. I would hope so.
Beauty, any other National League stuff you want to chuck out into the atmosphere of Aotearoa?
Yeah, well, just quickly because we were talking about Sarpreet Singh a lot in the Monday podcast after the no, we were talking about Sabotage a lot in the subscriber podcast, which people should pay us money to listen to because it's good chat and it helps support us doing what we do. And how Sabotage Singh was kind of invaluable to the All Whites. And then you had asked the question sort of offhand since then about like what other players have similar sort of scope to what Sabotage Singh does, similar playing profile, I guess. And I thought about what that means. And I think the thing with Sabotage Singh is, to borrow like a baseball term, he's a multi-tooled player in that he can, you get him the ball, attack in third, he can shoot, he can pass, he can dribble. He kind of has all 3 of those major options available to him. I'm thinking, well, what other players who are young enough to have professional careers ahead of them might match that? And Toomey was a guy who stuck out. I'm thinking, I think Lyle Matheson he plays on the wing for Kashmir Tech, is someone who does similar things, but is probably a little too old to have a pro career overseas. But certainly as a National League level guy, he's a very good one for that. Not counting imports, obviously. Matheson is a Kiwi South African, so he's sort of half and half. I think Dre Vollenhoven at Auckland United has a very different player to Singh. He's a bit more like strong and direct, but he again is someone who can create a goal with a pass, create a goal with a shot, create a goal off the dribble. Liam Gillian as well, again, no winger for Auckland City, but Sabotage Singh plays a lot of wings, so that's not a deterrent. He does similar things, not as much with the passing, although with Auckland City you have a guy named Cam Howison, who's the best passer going around. So that's all you got to do is you don't need to be a passer in Auckland City. You just have to be available for Cam Howison. And Howison doesn't do the other stuff that Singh does. He's not a dribbler. He can shoot, but he's not a shooter in the way that Singh is. But as a passer, he's immense. Few options there. I was thinking Wellington Phoenix. I was like looking through there to see who might be pushing through. Like Ben Wallace is someone who has some a little bit of fizz about him. I've heard very big things about Gabriel Sloan Rodriguez, who's only about 15, maybe just turned 16. He's started the last couple reserve grade games. Haven't seen much from him there yet. He's still sort of adjusting to that senior level, but he's someone who Oscar Zavada recently said on Instagram that he was the most talented dude coming through the academy. So that's a pretty big rap. Although the guy who's most similar to Sabotage Singh, I think, is probably Ben Old, who's a couple of years older, obviously, and in the first team, but just come back from injury. Actually, he had the same injury as Sabotage Singh. There you go. He had the same hip injury. So he's like him in ways that he even doesn't want to be like him. And then on the women's side, 4 names that I wrote down have all played age grade internationals, either under 20s or under 17s this year. Ella Jerez, Lara Colby at Western Springs, Zoe Benson at Eastern Suburbs, and Pia Vlock at Auckland United. To throw out a few names there of players who are not necessarily the same, again, style as Singh, but they're all players who have the same thing of they can shoot, they can create with a pass, they can dribble, and they're young and exciting and probably will at least play some A-League or something down the line, but we'll see how it goes. Pia Vlock is, I think, Vlock and Jerez are the 2 youngest ones there. They were in the under-16s recently. And Jerez scored the winning goal in the Kate Shepherd Cup finals. Winger, great dribbler. They're both like 15. So super young and already playing senior football at National League level. That's insane. And Pia Vlock, the more I watch her, I think like this is just another version of Ruby Nathan at the same club. Ruby Nathan's obviously just as an 18-year-old, just turned 18. She's like a week or two older than Millie Clegg, which meant she was allowed to play week one, whereas Millie Clegg has to wait another week. There's few options there for you, like showing there's plenty of attacking talent coming through. It might not be in the football ferns and all weights right now. We might still have to wait a few years for them to see that at the international stage, but you know, the pipelines are doing their job.
The pipelines are doing their job. I heard there wasn't a pipeline doing its job in the Auckland. There was an Auckland sewer pipeline or something that wasn't doing its job. So you might
There
want to
was one
get
in
those.
Wellington last year as well. This seems to happen across the country.
Yeah,
Maybe they should do something about that.
the sporting pipelines, they're trucking along pretty good in Aotearoa across all sports. So big up the Aotearoa sporting folks and big up yourself. We'll be delivering our newsletter tomorrow on Friday. We'll be back on Monday with another podcast. Check us out. We're doing our best. Love yourself. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Cheer.